skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello and welcome, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. I hope that life finds all of you blessed and in good health and well-being, and that you are able to sustain yourselves and take care of you and your children and your family without any difficulty. It's been a little while since I've been on with Brett. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, my brother. How about yourself? How you feeling?
I'm doing good as well. Yeah, just amazed. It's already summertime. I've been hard at work on this Holy Spirit book, and I am doing the final proofread. I'm halfway through that, and so I'm looking forward to finally getting it out and letting it go. How about yourself?
Great. Yeah, I've been doing the same, working on volume 3. But you said when did you just start this Holy Spirit book then?
It's been probably since the beginning of the year.
Wow. And you're already cranking it out. That's great.
Well, most of it was already written. It was just a matter of, putting it all together. I had started it long before I ever, put it into book form. You know how that is with the research that you do. And so, yeah, same thing with the next book I'm going to get into, which will be the study on Revelation that Justin and I did over the several weeks and months as we went chapter by chapter and verse by verse through that particular book of the Bible. And
that
so
sounds
exciting.
Yeah, did you
I think
find anything different than the mainstream, like that would stand out when you did your research?
Of course.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, most of the research that I do is, either contrary to majority opinion or most certainly different, only because it includes so much more than what most people, will read or study. And they limit themselves to mostly the 66 books of the King James. And so because of that, yeah, I have a very different viewpoint and perspective on a lot of things.
That makes it very limiting.
You're familiar. Yeah, it does, considering there are literally thousands of ancient manuscripts out there to read and study from, and there are, new materials coming forth all the time for consideration. And so, yeah, when you limit yourself to, just that little bitty percentage of what's available, it's not easy to have a very limited perspective and bias on what you think to believe to be truth.
Right. I think a lot of the establishment doesn't trust, discernment, and they don't think that we can actually think for ourselves, and they would rather just, come to them and have them dispose of what they think we should know and how we should interpret things.
Right. Yeah. That is the truth of the matter. And for most people, that's acceptable, but that's, what we would called the sheeple, those that
Yeah.
follow, and I'm not a follower. I'm a leader, and not even trying to lead, but just divergent. I'm separate and from the mainstream and doing my own thing, and so that's what makes a small percentage of the people different. Even that whole series of movies that came out about the divergence and everything. It explains that whole kind of concept.
Right. I mean, I've done the listening to preachers all my life thing, and I did have a lot of holes in my understanding, and I did feel a little lost in a lot of ways, and I understood what they said, but the more I did the independent research, you almost have to do it, because that way all these doors start to open up, and I know you can agree with me on that. It's just
Right.
these doors starting to open, and you want to dig deeper, and you will dig deeper, and once you dig deeper, you'll start to see the whole message, and then you also start to see why the wool's been pulled over our eyes in a lot of ways.
Right. Right. Yeah, and for individuals like you and I, we want to see the bigger picture. I
Hmm.
want to understand truth, whatever the cost, and I want to also be able to provide answer to others when they are also in need and seeking and looking for guidance, because there's so few really out there, I believe, that uh, hold any idea as to what, the whole theme of truth is stranger than fiction. Well, yeah, you find that to be absolutely true. So,
Absolutely. And if we don't do it, who's going to, not many
right.
people are going to actually want to take the bull by the horns here and try, because they're so used to, and just like I was used to the mainstream and the traditions that have been going on throughout the generations. I'm like, oh, my father believed this and blah blah blah, and it just keeps going down the line. And some of us have to break that cycle and just kind of branch out on our own, because it's so much of a better world when you understand the truth and what's really going on.
Yeah, I agree. And the way that children have that inquisitive mind and are
Hmm.
inherently wanting to know. It's all about, well, what about this and what does that mean and this that, and every when they're young, every sentence is a question,
Hmm.
and that I really believe that's how we should be as well, in wanting to know more about our world. But unfortunately, adults have resigned to accept, well, it is the way it is because that's just the way it is. Don't ask
Yes.
questions. Just get in line and take your shots. So
They get a little busy with life, and they don't really have the time to actually do what we're doing and search out. And I
yeah,
mean,
that's
sometimes
true
it's
as well.
easier, but it's their destiny, or that's at stake here, and it's their spirituality, and it's their whole environment, which is going south, that's at stake. So I think it's important for at least somebody to take a look here.
Most certainly. Why don't you, before we move on, give out your whatever you want as far as your social media contact information, your websites, and the books that you've done, and a small breakdown of on what they're about and why people should go and get them and read them.
Okay, the whole premise of Mystery Babylon I just ran across. Obviously, it's Revelation 17:5. It kind of intrigued me, that one verse talking about the whore and talking about the cup, and how it makes many drunken, and just understanding what the Babylon actually, what that signifies in the New Testament, because we know what it signifies in the Old Testament. So I started doing a little research, and going way back and doing the same thing as you did, where I would look at alternate sources besides just the Bible, because it's very limiting. But we know, at least from the Bible, how much Babylon is referred and reference to, and it talks about it throughout, especially the Old Testament. How the spirit of Babylon continued on, even after the city was laid waste and eventually was abandoned. But that's the interesting thing to me, is just, okay, what is so special? What is about this city that makes it so evil and so prominent? So I did a lot of research over probably about 20 years, and my first book is The Rise of Mystery Babylon, The Way of Cain, and it gets into a cultural element of this whole mystery belief and mystery systems of Babylon that continued after the city was no more. And it's divided into two books because it's rather large, but it still helps to provide a comparison of the old times around the time of Noah to today, because Jesus himself said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, the end times. So just to get a little bit of reference, I started doing research on these ancient times around the time of Noah, the antediluvian world, and shortly after, Tower of Babel, etc., where Babylon actually came from and started. Actually, it actually started before that, but it was popularized with Nimrod and Cush and the Tower. And it was interesting because a lot of parallels did seem to show up between the cultural ways people lived back then and today. So it provides us some evidence what Jesus said about at the times of the end, and when he was about to come back, is you'll start to see some of these same parallels. So again, Babylon is more of the steamship that helps the glue that helps keep it all together in this book to help show. And I've researched and found that Cain himself and some of these Nephilims were actually the people who were able to establish Babylon even before the flood. The gates of Bel is basically where we get Babylon from, and Bel is actually another term for the serpent himself. And Zen and I both have researched about Cain actually being the son of the serpent himself. So obviously it seems very appropriate that Cain would name that after his father. Okay, so there we go. The second volume I did a little bit more research on, and of course, as I had more time to look deeper into more sources, I gathered any source I could find, wherever. And it took, like I said, it took years, but I managed to get quite a few. This one deals a little more with the political and religious sides of things, those parallels from the days of Noah to today. So it goes a little deeper. The stories are a little more fascinating and relevant and connecting too, which is very interesting. That one is called The Rise of Mystery Babylon, the Tower of Babel. And I have a new one coming up, but that one will probably, hopefully at the end of the year, I want to get that one going. And this one will be a summary of some of the things in the first couple, but it will expand on it. It will be a chronological timeline, and it'll go even more into a lot of these questions and thoughts that really I don't think very many people at all have put out there. So it'll be quite interesting. I'm excited to get this one out. It's just been, again, it'll be another two-part volume because it's rather big. So right now, I only have one website. I'm getting my mysterybabylon.com website actually worked on and up and running fairly soon. But the one that you can, if you want to get some basics on the first book, you just, I have an old website called mystery-babylon.org. And you can check that one out just for a small reference. My email is mysterybabylon@1791.com. Very simple. So shoot me an email or anything if you have any questions about anything we talked about in this, or just any thoughts or, any things you don't like or whatever. I'd be glad to try to respond back. And my books are on Zen's website, that's for sure. So if you're interested in taking a look at them, sacredwordpublishing.com. Please check that out.
And we do have a bundle package available there for those of you that might be interested in getting, all the Brett's books. It'll certainly take you some time to get through. Very thorough research, a lot to be said. And, he and I are definitely in agreement with regard to Cain being of the wicked one, and so there's which most people don't even understand that truth, and I believe it to be revelatory because it unlocks so much that is hidden within Scripture and leads you to be able to, understand the riddle of why so many things can't be understood as they are connected to that particular theme. But
Absolutely.
yeah, go ahead if you want to comment on that, and then
Yeah,
I'm going
I
to ask you something else about that.
okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that because we talk about when you hear in the Bible and the preacher talks, some snake just started talking, or a serpent, just started talking to Eve. I mean, how can a serpent talk with no vocal cords? I mean, so many of these stories, and then Eve just ate a fruit, and that was, I mean,
Right.
I understand it's disobedience. That is a major thing, but there seems to be more to this whole story that wasn't exactly spoken of, because in other parts of the Bible we see so many references, like you said, Zen, about Cain being a child of the evil one, or the wicked one, and it's like, okay, what does that mean? Is that just a hypothetical, or what are we talking about here? And but it's talking in terms of seed and in terms of
Right.
spermatozoa. So it's interesting when you just start to do a little more research, especially when you get a few of these books that are outside the Bible. They start to actually tell it how it is, and that's what makes it.
Yes. Yes, and especially if you read my or Brett's books, where we compile all that information together in a cohesive form to help you to better understand the story. Because again, even just the whole, Eve ate a piece of fruit, an apple, as it's mostly depicted. People believe that she ate an apple or some grapes or whatever, and that this is the reason why God cast them forth from the place of the immortals, from paradise, and banished them here to the earth where they were amongst the fallen angels and themselves in a fallen form. And that all of that just does not make any sense at all. Why would God condemn humanity in large part for just eating a piece of fruit? I mean, I
Right.
understand disobedience, yes, and that it was a factor within it all. But when you look at the punishments, it you have to have cause and effect. You know, there has to be a reason why the serpent was told, "Well, I'm going to put enmity between your seed and her seed."
Right.
And then there's all of a sudden this enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. How does that make sense? And then the whole theme of, well, Eve, you're now going to have to bear children in pain and sorrow, and then your lust should be directed towards your husband and maybe not the serpent. Um, and then Adam having to work the ground to feed his future progeny. I mean, again, cause and effect. And so when you understand that the beguilement, as it says, the expatio, wholly seduced.
Always seduced.
Yeah, and Eve not being a chaste virgin. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it certainly it implies and is directed towards a physical seduction, an act which corrupted her and tainted her as far as being pure. And so, all these things, when you understand them, and which, how many churches even tell or teach the truth? Not many at all. Most people don't even understand this story. And it's so critical for making sense of so much of the scriptures and how they come together. The bloodline wars, even how the giants, too, are part of the progeny of the devil and why they were the arch nemesis of Israel. So much.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment, and then I'll ask you the
Yes,
other things I'll put you.
I absolutely. One thing that fascinates me all the time is, of course, is the Proto-Evangelium, the Genesis 3:15
Yes.
prophecy that talks about Jesus actually, and they talk about the generations that will actually work to get his heel bruised, and it's okay. Who are these generations of people, and why? And it's so interesting to see that the Canaanites, the post-flood Kenites, which is the same group, actually did get to slither their way into the priesthood as scribes, and I think it
Right.
was First Chronicles. But basically, they did actually get in, and obviously, the priests and the rabbis and just the Pharisees were actually the ones that helped railroad Jesus to his execution. So it fulfills
Right.
prophecy right there. But it's just fascinating. You can't have one without the other. I mean, you can't see that link if you don't understand what the Genesis 3:15 prophecy really means. And we're actually
Right.
talking about progeny here. We're not talking about theology or anything like that, or figuratively. We're actually talking about people actually trying to railroad Jesus to get him executed so he will be able to crush the serpent's head and the serpent's control over the world after he rises from the dead. And that's exactly what happened. It's
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah, I was actually talking about that story earlier, um, and how it is connected to even a prophecy that Noah gave, and the Ham seeing the nakedness of his father, and it says there, and Noah woke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him, and he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant." So, he had already foreseen how the Canaanites, and it was specifically the Hivites in Joshua chapter 9, that pretended they had this whole scheme of acting like they were from a faraway land and that they had come to uh, become allies with Joshua and the
Mm-hmm.
princes of Israel. And so they acted and portrayed that they were from, this distant land. And then because Joshua and the princes didn't seek the counsel of the Most High and just made a pact with them, they then were put into position to become servants to the Levites. And that's what they did until they actually usurped the authority of the Levitical priesthood.
Yep.
And killing Zacharias, the high priest, John the Baptist's father, they became the Pharisees that then conspired the murder of Yahushua. And he even said, of them that they were a brood of vipers and that their fathers had been the assassins, the murderers of the prophets. And so, again, all these things, unless you have clear understanding and unless you are able to make sense of the Genesis narrative and the story of humanity's fall, they just go over your head. You don't even
It's
recognize
yeah,
them.
absolutely. It's a link. Didn't Jesus say that he was a murderer from the beginning? So who was the
Yes,
first
exactly.
murderer? I mean, it's so obvious
Right.
who the first murderer was. So it was Cain. And there you got the
Yes.
Cainites actually doing their work, doing their dirty work after the flood. So right, if you don't have that understanding, connecting the dots, you're going to be thinking, oh, figuratively, oh, well, sin is bad. You won't get into understanding how it all went down and how it actually was all predicted at the very
Right.
beginning.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The very first prophecy there in Genesis is about the seed of the woman crushing the head of the serpent's seed.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is linked to the skull of Goliath and Daniel's killing the giant and burying his skull there in Calvary, which Calvary means skull, and Golgotha means Goliath of Gath. I mean, again, all these riddles that come forth when you have understanding. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you and get you to share, a, at least comment about, it's specific to your work, and that is the difference between Edom and Israel, and also, because we see the wars between the bloodlines continuing with Jacob and Esau, and how that also would play out between Rome and Israel. And so, if you would, can you comment on that as well?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about, where it was taking, where the spirit of Babylon had just taken Turkey, other United States even. I clearly, and again, everybody has the right to their own opinion, but the research, it just clearly shows Rome and one element of it. There's, I think in the book of Jasher, we talk about Zepho. I think he's a grandson of Edom, who is actually Esau. So we need to kind of make sure we understand that Esau is Jacob's brother, is Israel's brothers, obviously. So it's almost like a trading places type of switcheroo that this Esau and the Edomites have been trying to do since way back, is trying to get their birthright back and to usurp the true Israelites as any way that they can. And we saw it even in Jesus's time that the Edomites had slowly already taken control. And I think it was John Hyrcanus that actually made these Edomites, these neighboring Edomites, practice Jewish law and Jewish belief and follow the beliefs, like getting circumcised and such. But over time, when the Romans took over, they, of course, if they were of Edom themselves, they would probably tend to be more favorable to the Edomite faction of their conquered Jewish people. And that's exactly what happened. We saw that Herod was an Edomite who tried to kill Jesus upon his birth. So they are already in commanding positions in Israel, even way back before Jesus was even born.
Right.
So this whole Edomite attempt to regain their birthright, because most of us know the story with the pottage and the red pottage, and that's basically where we get the term Edom in the first place, is red. So we see things symbolized by a color red, which actually was Rome's color in their flags and such, interesting enough. But we do see that Edom and their people and all these descendants of Esau were very upset what happened with this birthright after a while, because it was a pot of beans to Esau at first, but after a while all these blessings came to Israel and they wanted it back. So they were a constant thorn in the side to the Israelites. So some groups, like I said, under Zepho, and they had some issues with actually Jacob. I think it was Jacob himself. You would probably be able to clarify that, and I'm sure you know Jasher very well. But they actually went up to Rome and started teaching the people in this early Roman settlement how to fight and how to do some dirty work and how to conquer. And that's why when you get some association with Edom with Rome.
Yes. And, again, the whole war of Israel, and even at the end of days, is also going to be connected to this ongoing enmity between the seed lines. And we're told by, Christ that let both grow together until the time of the end.
The tares.
Yes, the tares. And so they would grow amongst the wheat, and they would be, part of the enemies of God until the end of days. Because a lot of people believe, even if, it's hard for them to believe in the seed of Cain, but then if they do accept that there was the seed of Cain, they believe that they were completely wiped out with the flood, which is not true. And, the whole story of Ham and all of that and Canaan is part of the ongoing enmity after the flood, which continues between those particular bloodlines. But yeah, so all this is very fascinating, and it's so very relative and important to understand because it takes you into modern times, and it
Hmm.
helps you to make sense of even where we are now and how the war against the elites that sit upon the thrones of the world, and how they all the presidents are said to be of one particular bloodline. The bloodline, the genes, the lineages, the descendants, the children, the progeny, all that is so important to the story of the Bible. And, it's a part which, again, most people miss and don't understand. And because of that, it's hard for them to really understand what the Bible is actually writing about.
Hmm.
The who begot who and who was the son of who. Even the story of Luke chapter 3, how you see Cain is left out of the progeny of the Messiah. And this is also confirmed in both the Book of the Bee and the Book of the Cave of the Treasures, which, there's two other genealogical charts that can be found in those manuscripts which confirm Luke chapter 3. And so, these things are all very relative and very important to the story. But I'll give you a chance to comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to lead us into whatever you want to cover for this evening.
Okay. I agree totally with what you're saying, and I think the names and who begot who are very important in the Bible
Yes.
because they help show us a direct path of
Right.
where progeny is going. And you were absolutely right about Cain not being in there, and without those we would be kind of in the dark and jumping at anything, and we don't want that. We want to have some kind of a surety, and like you said, even those alternate sources point towards the same thing. I saw somebody write something about God hating Esau, and I think it says that twice in the Bible. And it's
Yes.
interesting because you picture God and you don't you just think about what he would be all about, and I don't it doesn't seem like he'd be such a God of hate.
Right.
But in this particular situation, I totally understand, in my opinion, why he would actually hate Esau. And the reason he hates Esau is because Esau and his descendants are imposters and hypocrites, and Jesus obviously did not like hypocrites, and they are doing this very, very strategically and under the guise of they are Christ-like, and they are they are wonderful, and they are just like a godly person. And I think that's what God hates the most. Is that's why he hates the Edomites to begin with. Again, I'm sure there's some good people or whatever, they might have been amongst them, but this the whole plan of what they were trying to do to usurp and get the birthright back is really upsetting, or was, to God.
Yes. Yes. And, I also believe that there is an aspect to that particular story which most people don't understand. And I think that it has to do with pre-existence. And the reason I say that is because when you consider that neither Jacob or Esau had been yet born to, to receive the favor or the condemnation of the Most High, it only makes sense that God would hate a child if there was a reason for him to have taken this position. And
Mm-hmm.
I particularly believe that the reason some are favored and others are hated has to do with the pre-existence in the war in heaven and the predestination that is spoken about in Ephesians chapter 1. This is something that I write a great deal about in my seventh book, Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny, because, again, when you ask most pastors to explain this story and why it is that God would hate Esau and Jacob be favored when, again, neither had even yet to be born. They were unborn children at that
There you
time.
go.
It doesn't make sense unless, of course, there was some factor connected to circumstances that we don't yet understand and of which the church is mostly quiet about. And that, again, has to do with pre-existence and predestination, which
Mm-hmm.
are two of the major themes that I cover within that book. And so, very good question from the audience there.
Very
Comment.
good. Yeah, yeah. I'm seeing a lot of good things in the chat right now. A lot of very interesting things. Okay. One real quick question for you, Zen, before we start with some of my work. I just curious on your new revelation, pre or post trib. I'm just curious your thought. I don't really dive into it much, but I'm just curious in your quick thought about that.
I am last Trump, last day,
Last
as
day.
far as you
Like the
if
rapture?
you're talking, yeah, the rapture. I believe that this all takes place on the seventh Trump, and that it's connected to the Levitical feast days and the three that are yet remaining to be fulfilled. My opinion is that on the seventh Trump, the church is raptured. We're called up in the air to be with the Most High, and then the wrath of God is to be poured out on the wicked and those not written into the books of life. And that the church the elect will, with Christ and the 10,000 saints that return with him, will from the air watch the wrath, the bulls, and all that being poured out upon the earth. Um, and, the stars and the blood moon and
Mm-hmm.
all of that, sun being darkened, all of those things will play out as the wrath is being poured out. The release of the locust army, the decimation of the creatures of the sea, all the ships being destroyed, um, and that there will be a time where water will become increasingly rare. That there will be a time when there's no rain, and they dig deep into the earth seeking water to drink, but God makes them drink blood. And what happens is that the waters, uh, uh, they turn blood red from a particular dust that I believe accompanies the wormwood, um, Planet X, if you want to call it, or whatever, that the destroyer that is spoken about in the Colburn Bible, it is also a part of the end time judgments, and that this dust is what turns the rivers and the water into blood. And so, um, but yeah, that will all be part of the new Revelation book that I'll be probably working on next year.
That's interesting.
I'll take a break after this one on the Holy Spirit is done, and
Okay.
then get into all of that. But yeah, yourself, where are you? Oh, real quick, one other thing is that
Sure.
when the seventh trump happens, I believe that the wrath of God, is poured out on the wicked, and then the earth is destroyed, the heavens and the earth destroyed. There will be a new heavens and a new earth, and then Christ will come down to the earth, and every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, all will be brought before him, for the wheat, the harvest, the the separation of the wheat and the tares, and then that will fulfill the Day of Atonement, and then the Feast of Sukkot Tabernacles. This is when New Jerusalem, John, Revelation 20:21, sees New Jerusalem descending out of the heavens. And again, this is after there's a new heaven and a new earth, and it comes down to the earth, and those from the harvest, those that are the righteous and considered and numbered with the elect, they will then enter into New Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of the millennial reign. And then after, Satan will be loose for a little season, and there will be after that, the great white throne judgment, where annihilation, the second death, and then the former things will have been passed away, where there's no more death, sorrow, aging, disease, any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, yourself, brother?
First of all, I don't really study the rapture too much for some reason. I think God's really kind of signaling that it's not nothing I need to really know. This one I would leave up to you, more the experts, because it's something, again, Revelation. There's parts of it that I attribute to the books and the volumes that I need to study, but that one I've always been a little bit curious to find out, because just from what your thought is, because you hear about the pre-tribulation, post-tribulation, but in your knowledge, I would take over any of those guys. And I believe that probably what you're saying is right. And if it is, it's a little scary to think about that. We'd probably have to go through it as a people too. We'd have to somehow survive all the tribulation and everything, which sounds a little bit not fun, you know.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like anything exciting, but I guess that's the way it has to go. Yeah, and what was I gonna say? I think that's it for now. But should I get into my
okay?
my
Yeah, brother. Yeah. Let's.
I remembered what I was gonna say. An interesting thing what you said about the lack of water and the water turning into blood. I just heard something just recently that said for a country to remain strong, it has to have a good energy source for its people, and it has to have enough food and enough means to make it, and food and water and etc. If you think about it, and it's just so interesting now what you think about with the New World Order, etc. What they're doing to this country, how energy is just going right up the roof as far as price, and so is food. It's becoming more and more scarce, and all of these meat packing plants are mysteriously burning. All these weird things are happening. And it's just interesting to see those two factors just going very, very much high in price now all of a sudden. And those are the things that keep a nation strong. So there's something going on. It's just strange.
Yeah, recently we have been speaking about and covering how Lake Mead, the lake that's created from the damming of the Hoover Dam, and also Lake Powell, which is part of the Glen Canyon Reserve, that these two lakes are at their lowest levels in for so very long, since even like the 50s. There's been a 22-year drought in the Southwest that most people are not aware of and not even talking about. There's still this whole real estate boom going on, where people are moving out towards California, Arizona, Phoenix, Las Vegas, those particular areas, and yet the Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam, there's not enough water even in it to generate electricity. And so, yeah, at some point that's going to lead to brownouts and to, electricity where they're not even going to be able to cool themselves. And it is hot there in the Southwest in the desert. And there's not enough water, not even for electricity, nor to create and to nourish the crops. And all of these things are coming to a head. And so people are going to have to, they're going to be forced to make a lot of choices, which are going to affect, whether it's going to be even, people can even live out there under those kind of circumstances.
Right.
And so,
sign of the times.
Yeah, definitely a sign of the times, because, in the scriptures, it does speak about how the land will turn into iron and become so brazen that it will crack And this is exactly what we see with regard to the lake, Lake Mead and Lake Powell and other places out there in the Southwest. It's so hard and so um, brazen that recently we've seen where there's been floods, and these floods are only like an inch or two of rain, but because the land is so hard, it's not able to absorb the waters, and so they just run off and flood out portions of the land and are creating havoc in places, like even like it doesn't rain very much in Nevada, and there was recently floods so bad that a lot of the casinos were damaged, and
Wow.
people had died, um, from not being able to get out of the path of these waters. So very, very strange times, and as you said, significant of, I believe, the that where we are as the fig tree generation.
Oh yeah, they need to weaken everybody. That's the whole goal.
Yes, 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 and they are doing that.
All right. Where we left off last time is my first volume, The Way of Cain, and I'm in part 2, the second book right now. And we're just getting into actually some more of these proofs and things to think about in regards to the alteration of the human race. In other words, we're talking, of course, the famous verse in Genesis 6:4. We talk about the sons of God uniting with the daughters of men and producing giants, and basically that's a huge tell. And anybody who tries to downplay that is just saying it's all figuratively, it's all this, it's all that.
Right.
No, it's very specific there, and I'm glad that's in the Bible, and they haven't found ways to to take it out or to twist it around or retranslate it. It's very, very telling. That whole chapter is very, very telling. So the reason why it's so telling, and even the thoughts of giants and bones and anything like that has to do with giant offspring, leads us to the concept of these fallen terrestrial angels that were around near the garden, around the garden, just like the serpent, were able to do this process of having sexual relations with human women. It obviously, these giants were the result of that. So anything that sheds light on that doesn't do good with their attempts to push evolution, or attempts to kind of hide this, because they want to hide this. They don't want this part about any type of offspring with 6 fingers or double rows of teeth or anything like that coming out that they actually see that looks different, that might actually point us towards the Bible, because we do actually even hear about that. I think it's after the flood with Joshua. They talked about these Anakim that were actually coming from the Nephilim, it says, and they had six fingers and 6 toes on each hand. And it's just interesting that the Bible mentions that, and now they've actually found these type of things, or they've seen murals on the wall. Ancients have pictured 6 toes on a foot, and it's fascinating. But it does show us something, that there might be something to what the Bible has to say here.
Oh, without a doubt, the evidence is coming out worldwide. I mean, they are finding, entire graveyards of these giant skeletons with elongated skulls, 6 fingers, 6 toes. The whole story of the place there in Nevada, the Lovelock Cave, and the stories that were spoken about and shared by the Paiute Indians of how in the early 1800s that their people used to be at war with a race of red-haired cannibal giants that had blue eyes, green eyes, and that they would abduct their people, and they would eat them, they would cannibalize them, and how all the Indians had to gather, the native peoples had to come together in order to wage war against these giants, so that they could have enough strength and power to eradicate them, and to decimate their numbers, to actually, you know, have some kind of effect on um, their size, against their size and their stature. And they were said to have backed them up into a cave there in the canyon in Nevada, in a place called Lovelock. And they set these fires, and they warned, told the giants to come out and to surrender. And they didn't. They just rather stay in the cave, and they had suffocated, asphyxiated to death. And, the story was basically forgotten, even though it was written about by this Paiute Indian princess in her book. And so it was, it was memorialized into print. And then later, I think it was in the 1930s, 40s, something of that nature, there was a group of individuals who went into the cave and started to extract the bat guano for fertilizer for saltpeter, to make gunpowder, and also to sell as fertilizer. And they started removing all of this, what was like 30 feet of this bat guano. And in doing so, they were then able to locate a number. I mean, there was like, I believe a couple hundred skeletons, a large number of the skeletons, males and females, that were in excess of 7 feet tall, 7 to 8 feet tall. Um, Children, all of these hunting gear, duck decoys, and things of that nature that they utilized to survive and to succeed as a species out there in that particular region. But yeah, all of that was found, and there are still places that have these skeletons, but the heads. But most of this has disappeared, and a lot of it was given to the Smithsonian. And we know that the
Yep.
Smithsonian Institute is not in accord with this information, and that they have been antagonists and working against supporting this idea, because they support evolution, and they want people to believe in Darwin, and that humanity evolved in monkeys. And so
Yeah.
yeah, but
You
we're
hear about the,
almost to break. But let me give you a chance to comment real quick, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
you ever hear about the barge theory with the
No.
Smithsonian? About they took all of it and
Oh
dumped
yeah,
it.
yeah. Just dumped it out into the lake. Yeah.
Quite interesting.
I did hear about and read about those stories, and how they've disappeared so many artifacts, and even things that were not connected to the giants, but connected to other ancient mysteries, like Kincaid, the explorer, Kincaid, who was said to have found and discovered all these artifacts out there in the Grand Canyon in the Southwest.
Oh yeah, yeah, the
Um,
Egyptian artifacts.
yeah. And even in Illinois, there was said to be artifacts and discoveries of the child that was said to be born of uh, Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, that they had a son, and they were going to murder him. And so he left. And it's said that he came to America with this whole huge entourage, and that they, had settled there in Illinois and left all these artifacts and very expensive treasures. And
Interesting.
that's
I wonder if
another
it was
something.
like Cahokia. Would it be Cahokia?
I don't even know, what his name was, or, but, there's a lot of information and stories about ancient America that we're not privy to. And there literally were graves of giants all over America in these mounds.
Mhm.
Hundreds of skeletons have been found all across America, which have been hidden. All right, we'll be right back, everyone, for second hour.
Okay.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. They're trying to dumb us down. Don't want us to make a sound. We gotta get out of now, 'cause it's a revolution.
Revolution.radio, freedomslips.com.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope.
We've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence. the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And I'm joined this evening by my good friend and author, Brett Thomas. We're talking about his Mystery Babylon website and series of books that he's released, which you can find all at sacredwordpublishing.com. And I'm sure Brett writes a lot of information about the Giants, as well as I have also in talking about the bloodline and the Seedline Wars. But I will turn it back over to you, Brett, and we will continue with the show.
Okay, thank you, Zen. Yes, when I did the research for these books, I did as many different sources I can find that would give us some information on the Giants, and I put it together in more of a chronological way so I could insert all these things on top of it to give us better understanding. So that's why we find a lot of different sources. Enoch, a lot of different sources that actually point us towards something of this nature, which is very interesting. It does fill in the gaps and fill in so much more, gives us so much more to help our understanding. So when I'm talking about the second book here, part 2 of the first volume, I get into a little bit. It's past the fall right now, and Adam and Eve are out, and a lot of women of the day obviously found it advantageous to use their bodies to just get knowledge, because these terrestrial angels that were there around them, they call them the Nephilim, the fallen ones. And I guess we find that they have fallen because they didn't want to really serve under Adam. That was one of their major sins, is that they did not want to allow a person of dust like Adam to be their viceroy. That's one of the main reasons they were punished. So now they were punished by not really being able to return to heaven and having to stay as a terrestrial, almost like a terrestrial human being, with the same facilities as regular human beings. And a lot of people might look at that and say, what does that mean? But we got to remember these angels that visited Abraham and Lot. They ate food, they rested, and, Lot had them over and had meals and such. And so they looked and act just like human beings. So if these angels of God were able to do the same thing, why weren't these other ones that have fallen from God's pathways able to do the same?
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that, right, Zen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, again, there are very interesting books, especially the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets, and it speaks about how celestial entities, once they are banished to this particular fallen world, that they start to assume physicality, that, being caught up here. And even the Sumerian chronicles, they talk about how their gods, that even though they live almost immortal lifespans, that they would eventually succumb to death and that they would die. And so, which we see in the story of Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 about Satan, Lucifer, that he also will die the death of a man. And that this was the sentence, the punishment for anybody that was had fallen and left the place of the immortals, that in God's house, that this is only for the immortal spirit, that flesh cannot go there. And we see that in the story of even the angels that left their first estate and the fall of the rebel angels in the story in Psalms 82, that they would and were sentenced to die the death of a man, that they were placed under the authority of death, just like Adam and Eve when they had eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which of course we know was a sexual beguilement, which led to the birth and the progeny of the serpent seed and the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, that all this is playing out here on the earth. And that this was also the reason why Christ entered into mortal form and became and was born, even though he was immaculately conceived. He was born as a descendant of Adam, as the seed of the woman that would crush the head of the serpent seed that nipped at his heel. And so, again, all these themes are knowledge, is pieces of knowledge and revelations which are connected to this information that we're talking about, and that, again, most people have no understanding of. And when I talking about just the general layperson, I'm talking about the church authorities, and that most people, they look to for help with interpretation on the Bible. Pastors, preachers, ministers, all these people that are the heads of churches around the world, they don't even understand this story. And so, if the leaders that are supposed to help people to make sense of the scriptures don't even understand what they're talking about, how's anybody going to make sense of the scriptures? It's the blind leading the blind out there.
I believe it's by design, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Which is, again, why Christ tells us in Matthew chapter 13, God also expresses to us that unless one has the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and a mind to understand, you're simply just not going to get it. That he said of this particular revelation that it was a secret, it was knowledge that was kept secret since the foundations of the world. I mean, that's a very, very long time. And that even though this truth is found plainly within the scriptures, so many people are opposed to it and against it that most will never understand it. And it's unfortunate because it explains the truth.
But at least all these people in the chat, they want something better, and I like that. I like people who are inquisitive and they want something more. That's why they're here. So I'm so glad that there's not just us, a few of us out there. I'm glad more and more people are actually waking up and starting to see that there's something more to this world.
Yeah, what a great blessing it is to have this community. I'm so appreciative to everybody there in the chat and all the people that come to support to this show and to listen to our broadcast. It is a great blessing to have all of you as family and to be able to even talk about these kind of things on these kind of levels. I mean, again, you can't go into most churches in the world and talk with the pastor about these kind of ideas because they just simply don't get it. And so who do you turn to for even conversation?
Right.
I mean, it's us. It's all of us out there that really we are, and I'm, in no way trying to brag or trying to be puffed up, with any of us, but we are the wisdom keepers. We are the holders of the secrets. We are been blessed by the Most High to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and a mind to understand, and we're able to share these things and talk to each other in this way to where we can come cleanly and plainly about what is really contained and revealed within Scripture. And it's unfortunate that most of the world is not able to do this, and most people that are truth seekers, they have nobody to turn to for such deep and profound conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's all by design. I mean, again, I think it says in the Bible, at the end times, the world has to be ripe to a certain pagan degree for the Antichrist to come. So, I mean, if it was strong with Judeo-Christian values, it wouldn't happen. So it has to kind of be that way, which is sad to say, and it is. It's turning that way very quickly.
Yeah, we, one quick mention, Revelation 12, that old serpent, that ancient dragon, which deceiveth the whole world.
There you go.
And so, it tells us that and he's been worshipped since antediluvian times, all throughout the ages. The serpent has beguiled not just Eve and impregnated her, but has beguiled the minds of everybody to hide these truths and to keep secretive, that he even has progeny here in this world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he has the names of Bel, and those very ancient names, and Moloch. I mean, I think that was a corruption of Amalek, which in the Bible basically says that he was the first of the nations. So his descendants were among the first nations that out there, and that's exactly true. And then you have the sun worship, and so many of these pagan societies on either side of the pond, basically all worshiping the sun and have the serpent that are out there, and they're as a divine entity. It's all the same, but it all comes back from the serpent himself.
Right. Yeah, and when you speak about sun worship, and how it says in the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 13, to not worship the stars or the creation, but to worship the Creator that established them all. The sun worship is also part of the loss of knowledge when it comes to biblical cosmology, and to the understanding of the dynamics of how the Earth is, flat, and that the circle of the Earth inscribed upon the square, that we are the foundation, stationary, fixed, non-moving foundation for the luminaries which are encircling above us, and that they all move around Polaris, the North Star Polaris, and not the sun. And yet, even these things are hidden and not understood by the majority of the world. And so, when you don't even understand where you are or the dynamics of where you live, I mean, there's a reason why when you go to the beaches for vacation and you look out over the oceans and the water is flat all the way across the horizon. I mean, there's something very contrary to what we are being told with regard to us living on a sphere, and that the Earth is one of 9 planets moving in circle in orbit around the sun. We never, even second guess these things because we believe them all to be correct, all to be settled, and all to be truthful. And here we find out that they are lying to us about everything. You can't trust nothing they say about anything. So unfortunate.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And then the scary part again about that is, it's not necessarily just these luminaries in the sky that we see. It's the actual significance of them and what spirit or what angel or what demonic force of the other side that's actually behind them. So, when they're actually worshiping
Right.
the sun, these pagan religions, it's not like it's, oh, thank you for giving us heat so we can grow crops and etc. There's actually a deity behind that, an actual being from the other side that they're attributing all their thankfulness and their petitions of everything to. So that's the scary part, because a lot of these stars and etc. do have something that's more behind them rather than just saying it's the bear or it's any of these other stars that are out there, or Orion. It's interesting how much it's been corrupted by paganism this way.
Yeah. The stars are celestial deities. They're entities. They were the gods of old, the fallen angels that paraded themselves and that set themselves up to be the gods, the pantheon of gods and goddesses that were worshipped by the Gentile nations in ancient times. And that's why it's so important to read, even the books of Enoch and all, like the um, eh, the Clementine homilies that reveal these kind of things. Because otherwise, like so many people, even in this day and age, they're turning back to the old religions. They're worshiping Sumerian gods now because they buy into and they believe the whole thing that the ancient aliens created us. And so, these deceptions were not just idolatry in ancient times, but they are modern day strong delusions.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's why, it's again important for us to understand biblical cosmology, to examine these things, to look into them. So many people say that they're meaningless and that it's not worthwhile to spend any of your time looking into flat Earth. But for a lot of people, that could be the most critical thing when it comes to truth and helping people to understand that there is intelligent design, that there is a maker. And when I speak about the maker, I'm talking about the triune Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, that they are the true pre-existing Godhead, which established all things. And the rebel angels, they're nothing but fallen angels. They're the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, which Paul speaks about in Ephesians chapter 6. They're not really gods. They are created beings. They're angels that, like humanity, were given the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the breath, and that aspect of us is what connects us to the Godhead. And they have that same connection. That's why they're called the sons of God. Brett?
Right. That's why, I mean, the old occult is nothing but the new age today. That's what they call it. It's the same stuff. It's just regurgitated to make it look, antichrist. In other words, like Christ or like wonderful or just another pathway to God or etc. That's what it's used for. But it's the same old.
Right.
I got go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing really quickly, that even the Catholic Church now is coming forth that there's a certain segment of their priests that are also accepting and releasing in disclosure that the ancient aliens are the gods of humanity and Genesis, and that Yahweh is an extraterrestrial, and that Christ is from the Great White Brotherhood. I mean, they are just drinking the Kool-Aid.
It's interesting. You hear that, and then you think, okay, well, the aliens came and they deposited. Who created the aliens?
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
did they come
Right.
from? It's just
Right.
it's such a ludicrous argument, and it's something when they can't figure out well, where did this world come from and who fashioned it in such a wonderful way? They have to go there or go to something else.
Right.
Like, oh, it must have came outside. So, okay,
Uh-huh.
whatever. I got a little thought to throw at you, Zen. A little
Yeah,
curve
sure.
here, but it's interesting. I'd like to have your thought on it. I manifest the more that I research, the more I'm starting to manifest that these Nephilim before the flood, they were actually, again, they were divine, not divine, but they were beings of actually, immortal is more the word I was trying to say. And once they lost their estate, like it says in Jude, which is awesome, they had to take on the human form and became more human, etc. The more I research, the more I'm thinking that they probably would have stayed on this earth continually unless something did kill them or take them out. That's my thoughts, and like I said, I want to hear your thoughts on it. But because they were already immortal beings, they probably would have stayed, lived immortal lives, and continually unless something like a flood didn't take them out. And I think we recall, I think it talks about in the Bible, 15 cubits upward of the highest mountain, etc., that the waters went. And that's interesting because if you think about it, 15 cubits is, I'm not sure how many, it's 16, 20 feet or something, but that would be more than enough to take out any giant of that time, which is interesting. It's just interesting why that was put in there. And basically for me, it's kind of showing that, if something fell, if a rock fell or something fell on one of these Nephilim and killed them, then they would have been done. But I think they knew that something was going to take them out, and they were very scared about it because they knew God's wrath was upon them. They ran to Enoch and they asked him, please tell us what's going on, what's coming for us, because I think they knew that something was going to kill them and they weren't going to stay here immortally. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And we see this in the Book of Giants. It speaks about how in the Book of Giants that God began to give them dreams, and they realized, in their dreams, it was like about the cedars, and the giants have always been alluded to as like the cedars of Lebanon, which were giant trees, and that the Anakim are compared to the strength of the cedars of Lebanon. But anyways, they saw the forest being decimated and the trees being toppled, and also other dreams where, and it was meaningful to them because it was an illusion to them, but that God was going to destroy them, and that he was mad at them, so that he was going to bring about their demise. And yes, they did go to Enoch and ask him to interpret these dreams, and that the fallen angels asked Enoch to
Pray.
ask God, to pray to God on their behalf for forgiveness, and that their children would survive the flood. And he said, you are supposed to pray for man and not man for you. And that's all found in chapter 15 in the book of Enoch. But basically, yeah, they did receive these dreams and they were scared. And then we see in the book of Enoch that the angels, the archangels, that Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, and Phanuel, they were sent out to set wars, the giants against one another, and that would be part of their demise. And also that it was said in other places, like I'll share with you a passage, and it says here, and I said, and I pray thee, show me which is the tree which led Adam astray. And the angel said to me, it is the vine which the angel Samael planted. Whereat the Lord God was angry, and he cursed him and his plant. And therefore the devil, being envious, deceived him through his vine. And I, Baruch, said, since also the vine has been the cause of such great evil, and is under judgment of the curse of God, and was the destruction of the first created, how is it now so useful? And the angel said, thou askest aright. When God caused the deluge upon earth and destroyed all flesh and 409,000 giants, and the water rose 15 cubits above the highest mountain. Then the water entered into paradise and destroyed every flower, but it removed wholly without the bounds the shoot of the vine and cast it outside. So this is the passage you were alluding to with the, the water rising 15 cubits above the heights of the mountains, which, as you said, was enough to drown all of the giants. So this was part of the judgment that was levied against them. And the deluge was a judgment against the giants and the fallen angels, and not just humanity. Yes, most of humanity had gone the way of Cain, and that Noah and his ancestors, that there were only 8 by his time that were still righteous in the world. Everybody else had, in going the way of Cain, had become corrupted genetically. And it speaks about this in the book of Giants, that it was the miscegenation of all things, that there was no longer, anything that was natural, but everything was hybrid and abomination. And so that was the reason why God had to bring a flood upon the world. It was to set things straight and allow Noah and his children to grow up in a place where they wouldn't have to worry about getting eaten by cannibal giants. I mean, that was imagine 409,000 giants that, are the enemy of man, and that are seeking to cannibalize the generations of Adam. That's a lot of enemies, and these are formidable foes. They were haughty and proud. They were able to decimate. Nobody could come against them. Og of Bashan, he was the king of 60 cities there in the Middle East. Yeah, in Canaan. Him and his brother Sihon. Yeah, and when they heard, and the reason most of the giants didn't even bother to come out to join Og and Sihon in their war against Israel is because they believed them to be formidable enough that they were going to wipe out Israel with not even much effort. And so when they heard that Sihon and Og had been destroyed, it scared all of the giants and all of the Anakim and all of the people of Canaan that were from their bloodlines. I mean, they lived in these formidable cities with high-walled villages. There was nothing that would even terrorize them. And yet God brought down their walls, and Joshua decimated them. And so, so the flood was a judgment against the giants and the fallen angels for their interdiction into the affairs of humanity.
One thing that's very interesting that I find, you had that story you talked about in Vegas or Nevada about those Indians that gathered together to take out the giants. Exactly the same thing we read in the antediluvian world about these giants doing the same thing. I mean, of course, they were pagan and they had the pagan lean, and there was a lot of people out there, human beings, that had the pagan lean, but that didn't seem to matter to them. They really didn't have no camaraderie. They went after anybody they felt, that was somebody to take advantage of, who was human, and basically this cannibalistic drive by them was really great. And again, we see that back in Nevada, and even before the flood, we've heard about that they were cannibals back then. So they were very much a nemesis to people before the flood and after, and nobody liked them as neighbors because they were just they were very, very warlike, and they were just horrible to be near.
Yeah, everybody was afraid of the giants because they were so large and huge in stature. I mean, even now, the Jack and the Beanstalk and those kind of stories, children are fearful of giants. And, I can't even imagine what it would be like to have come across these beings in ancient times and to have been
I know. They're
threatened
like grasshoppers.
by them. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And, the native peoples talked about how they would kidnap people of their tribes. And the way that they would torture and eat them is they would keep them alive, and they would cut pieces of their flesh from them and either eat it, raw, or they would roast them in the fire in front of them. And they would do this until, their deaths were brought about. There's even stories now of the Solomon Island mysteries that speak about even giants that were alive in the late 18th century, but that had since gone into the interior, into the hollow earth. But they used to be the enemies of the native peoples that lived there. And there was a story of the chief's daughter, that she had become pregnant, and this one giant came in and just slaughtered their warriors. And they decided to leave the island and to leave that place because it was, just crawling with giants. There were giants that would come all the time to steal people from the tribes so that they could consume their flesh. And he decided to leave his daughter behind, and she gave birth to twins, and she was able to survive. And she taught her twins how to hunt, and they were adept at hunting, and they were very skilled. And when they heard the story of how the giant had run off their tribes, they decided they were going to go after him, and they succeeded in killing this giant. They cut off his head, brought it back to the camp, and they set a huge fire. And then the tribe, the people came back. They discovered the twins, and the chief saw that his daughter was still alive. And then he met his grandsons and saw the head of the giant, and that their enemy had been dispatched, and they all moved back to the islands. But yeah, this is all a true story. It's part of the Solomon Island Mysteries, a book about modern day giants that it used to be available on Amazon when I spoke about it a long time ago, but it has since been bought up. And
what's it called?
I don't think the Solomon Island Mysteries.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book. Definitely recommend people read it and study it. And if you can get access to a copy, I wish I would have bought, like 5 copies, but I have one here somewhere in the house. But absolutely fascinating story.
Interesting. Yeah, there was a lot more to eating human flesh than just hunger. I mean, there's a lot of like esoteric and spiritual elements to cannibalism. I mean, it goes down to actually when you do this worship, you're supposed to, when you do that, it's supposed to help you get more power from the other side, etc. Like it's almost like, and again, people laugh about it, but like a vampire drinking blood. It's a power thing. It's supposed to help get you more of a supernatural connection and power. That's one reason why they were so hooked on these things. They were hooked on a lot of very crazy sexual activities, etc. A lot of these things
Right.
were just to help give them power in war, and it's almost like they were hooked on drugs, and they had to use their neighbors in any way they could to get their high. That's pretty much why
Oh
they were
yeah,
so.
the drinking of blood. I mean, there's a whole science behind terrifying individuals so
Oh
that their
yeah,
blood is flooded with adrenaline. You know, the whole adrenochrome,
yep,
and all of that, and you know that this is a drug to the Illuminati bloodlines that do participate and still conduct such rituals. It's not a big secret. People can, look this stuff up for themselves. I've written
oh yeah,
about it, and
in Hollywood.
there's a lot of in Hollywood. There's a lot of stories about this as well. But as you said, this was part of the worship of the fallen angels and the giants. That they had ritualized these practices, and that cannibalism and the drinking of blood, even what they call the consuming of starfire, which is, the menstrual blood of women, that this was ritualized. And, we know that the scriptures declare that women are unclean during this particular time of
Yep.
their cycle. But the Illuminati have turned this upside down, perverted it, and they've made a celebration, a ritual, to where a menstrual blood is actually consumed for power. And
And you
so
notice I've always talked about this, and I'm sure you agree with me. It's either one way or the other, and it's either one way, it's a godly way, or it's a way of the other side, or
right,
the unholy one. And you notice again, your example about menstrual blood just perfect, because again, God dictates that as unholy and unclean. And of course, what does those patrons of the other side do? They take it as a prized possession.
right,
It's just
exactly.
interesting about of all. And then blood is the life. You do not want to be
Right.
shedding blood, but of course, what do the giants do? They love to do the opposite.
Right. Yeah, and for people that don't believe us when we are talking about these things, I'll share a real quick passage. This is from Micah chapter 3. It says, "And I said, Hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment, who hate the good and love the evil, who pluck off their skin from off of them, and their flesh from off their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people, and flay their skin from off of them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces, as for the pot, and as flesh within the cauldron? Then shall they cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doings." And so, this is talking about a time when even the princes of the house of Israel, they had gone astray and taken up and performed such practices in the same way that they used to sacrifice their children, passing them through the fire as offering to Moloch, that they were involved in such abomination. They became so perverted in their ways and their religious and ritual practices that they would do these kind of abominable things, which, your spirit should tell you that if you're abusing children or offering a victim sacrifice, or your own children as a sacrifice to some god, that is demonic. That is not holy in any manner. And if you're practicing or performing or being involved in such things, you are worshiping the dark side. And so, and that is also made clear within the scriptures as well.
Yeah, it's in paganism today, you could look it up. In today's modern books, they say there's 3 elements that are highly revered in I'm talking about bare bones paganism, and one is the sun, which is supposed to be the architect or the divine god, whatever they call them, his representation in the sky. And then you have the serpent, which is his spiritual representation on earth, and then you have fire, which is his natural representation. So when you pass a child through the fire, basically in the pagan world, they believe that you're actually purifying the child and you're setting it free, or you're making it better, but obviously we know what the real result is and what's actually going on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Again, they turn everything upside down.
Right.
Just like what we were talking about with the Starfire. And, again, these things, if you don't believe us, I mean, look them up for yourself. There's a whole interview that was done by David Icke with the Arizona Wilder, who was a mother goddess figure in the Illuminati worship and the performance of these kind of rituals. And I was given the permission to publish, portions of this particular interview that he did, and you can find them in the second book of the pre-Adamite Antediluvian World series, the Dragon Lords, the Antediluvian Kings, and I speak about the blood rituals, and these things are also mentioned in very ancient texts like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are said to be like 25,000 years old. They tell the story of the Atlantean priest kings, Thoth, when Atlantis was destroyed, and how they were separated in diaspora, and that the Atlanteans split up and went to different parts of the world. And at that time, they, began to intermingle with the people, like, for instance, the children of Kim, which were in Egypt, and
That's
how
Ham, right? Ham?
Yeah, Ham, exactly.
Yeah, C-H-E-M.
Yes. And so, yeah, they involve themselves even with other ancient cultures as well. Like even in China, we have the story of how the Dragon Lords came down from heaven and created a line of kings there in China. And this story is repeated over and over. And it's basically the story of Genesis 6. The sons of God mating with the daughters of Cain and creating a race of giants. And, that these giants with the elongated skulls, they were the ones that became like, Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. They became the pharaohs and the queens. Nefertiti, who had a elongated skull. These were the royals. They were the elites. They were the priests and the kings and queens of these different cultures that were established by this Anunnaki interdiction. And yeah, they did create these hybrid lines, but they didn't create humanity. They just mixed with humanity. Just as David said, that they will intermingle themselves with the seed of men. And so you really have to understand the story and understand the deception, or you could get caught up in what the Bible calls the strong delusion. And if you are going to bow down to these ancient aliens and accept them as your gods, you're basically accepting the mark of the beast. And that is a big no-no, according to Scripture.
Yeah. What was the name of that book again? Thoth? What was it?
The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, Thoth, yeah.
Did they actually talk about Atlantis in there, or did they hint about
yeah.
it? They did?
Oh, no, they talk about Atlantis, yeah. And the destruction of it and how they left when it was destroyed. There's another book that you should check out. It's called The Scroll of Thothis. Thothis. And it's in the Colburn Bible. And it's also the story about the destruction of Atlantis.
Really?
Yeah, I cover it in great detail.
Oh, that's good. Was that in the, what is that in Father of Cain? Because I know you talk about the Colburn Bible.
No, it's in the, well, I published it a few times, but in the Antediluvian series, it's in the Pre-Adamites in the Antediluvian world.
Okay,
you can find the whole story in there. And it's also in Paradise, Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation. Because in that book, I talk about the destruction of the First World Age, which in the Pre-Adamite series I go into in greater detail. That's why it's found in that book as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm having some theories and thoughts about Atlantis actually in the upcoming volume, and I think it does have a say, and it does have a relation to where the pagans went in mass, especially a lot of the elitists and the giants and the people with knowledge actually ended up in Atlantis, which is probably right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or where Donnelly said it was. But even the name itself, Atlantis, basically, if you piece it together, this word "at" is really could be translated as the first, or the first one. And if you think about it being honored in honor of the beast, or the serpent himself, it makes total sense, because they're naming their land after their primary god, who was At. And At is like a title that I've done some research and found that At can be other things. People be like, you have an atlas,
Right.
But Atlantis is, for what I believe, and the research that's going on right now, is I believe that they basically, a lot of pagans had to leave certain areas like Babylon. It was either something was going wrong there, drying up, or something, but they eventually ended up in a little bit beyond the Pillars of Hercules, exactly where Plato says it was. And when Atlantis was eventually destroyed, the remnants, including giants and including a lot of people in the know, some of them fled to America in different aspects and parts of the country and the continents, was like North America, South America. Some of them probably went back into the Mediterranean again, ended up in Sardinia, and went into England, and because that's right, a company right by where Atlantis would be. And they, you've heard of this, the sea people ending up back in Canaan again, where you get Goliath. They say, hey, they come from somewhere. They came from the sea. I'm just starting to figure that possibly this Atlantis could be an actual place and an actual thing that they'd want to cover up, because they don't want to tell you that the giants were amongst the first in the Americas, fleeing Atlantis. And you've heard of the Aztecs coming from Azland, Azland, and that's so close that the Atlantis, and it's an interesting topic once you think about it. And that seems perfectly likely that's something that they would cover up and say, oh yeah, it happened 10,000 years ago. We can't find out anywhere. We might as well just forget it. It's just a fantasy.
Yeah, if you're interested in Atlantis, you should definitely read my series on the Pre-Adamites. I cover it in great detail within those particular books. Just want to give a shout out to Gabriel from the Philippines, and Sonny, and everybody, Ruth, and in the chat, of course, Tammy and Hebrew Hawaiian, Rock. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for listening to the shows and supporting our work. We love all of you, and we love speaking about these things and sharing this information. And yeah, it's an important aspect, because in my opinion, Mu, which that's another thing you should check out, the work of James Churchward on the motherland of Mu, which is another name for Atlantis as the mother culture, and how this culture was destroyed, and the diaspora that happened, which is spoken about in the Emerald Tablets. a thought that the Atlanteans split up and went to different parts of the world, and how all these cultures came up at the same time in the same way, with all the megalithic structures, the cyclopean architecture, the alignment to the solstices and the equinoxes, and the pyramidal structures, and also the blood sacrifice, which was also part of the cannibalism. It's an unspoken part of, the demand that the Atlanteans brought upon the people that they raised in technology and knowledge. And it was for this reason that Atlantis was destroyed in the first place. And so every time they went somewhere else, they established this same ritual abuse into the worship of these cultures and places. And these people were exposed to and forced to involve themselves in this kind of, again, this kind of ritualized abomination. And that's why God brought down all these ancient cultures, and the Atlanteans. And you can see even from their stories that it talks about how they were involved in these dark magic. That's in, the Emerald Tablets, and all of them speak about that. The Scroll of Thothis. So they were doing and involving themselves in black magic, and the demand for blood and sacrifice is what brought judgment upon them. And this is, why even the elites in this day and age, they will, they're going to bring judgment upon themselves, because they are performing and involving themselves in this continued behavior.
Yeah, it's interesting. Where did all these people across the pond get their same information as the ones in the old world? That's what's fascinating to me. They even have a legend, I think, in the New World about the Tower of Babel. I think you probably heard of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How did and if they all just develop by themselves, as isolationism will try to convince you or tell you, how did they all develop these same type of rituals, blood sacrifice, as you're talking about, the serpent, and the pyramids too? How and why would they be building pyramids all over the world if everybody just kind of sprung up? And where did they get all this knowledge? Where did they get all this mathematics? And where did they get all these the way to build these fascinating and structures that are still around today?
Yeah, that we can't replicate and that we can't create, even in this day and age with the technology that, we're supposed to be the most advanced ever in the world, and yet we can't create things that were done thousands of years ago by the first cultures here on the on the earth, the fallen angels and the giants that created those technologies and places. So it tells you a lot about where we are.
Oh yeah. And yeah, sacred geometry, it tells a lot of where that all comes from, because how can they explain it other than aliens? There's no other reason that they can explain it. But again, they need to hide the giants. They need to hide fallen angels. They need to hide that whole story, because ultimately they need to hide where Cain really came from, and the whole prophecy in Genesis 3:15. They need to hide it all.
Yeah, because that's the truth. And they don't want us to know that they're actually demons. They're not really gods. They're not ancient aliens. They're not from out there. They're from the inner earth. Sheol is the domain of Legion. They've been here with us since even before the creation of modern humanity. And that's something that people need to learn and come to understand, because that's the only way you'll be able to make sense of the story. But hey, brother, we are at the end of the show. It was another awesome show. I think, the people that are in the chat really appreciate the conversation. So and hey, brother, if you want me to send you a copy of the Antediluvian series, I'll be glad to do that.
Okay, let me check and see if I have them, Zen. I have a number of your books, so I'll check that too, and I'll get back to you, okay, first, or else I'll order them. I appreciate it. I definitely want to research them because you that'll be a great head start for me.
Yeah, we can just barter for your newest books. Whenever you have those come out, I'll just go ahead and autograph some and send them to you, and then we'll trade when your others come out.
Absolutely. Sounds good, brother.
All right, brother. Sounds good. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate all of you. Be blessed in all that you do, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night, all.
We'll be back in 2 months, right, Zen? 2 months at least for me.
Yeah.
2 months. I think it's the second Wednesday, I think, of the month, but you might want to check it. Thank you, Hebrew. Appreciate it.
Be blessed. Good night, all. Shalom.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
She travels to Earth through the rainbow crystal bubbles from the furthest reaches of space and time, across the dimensions, through the elements, and in harmony with the colors of the universe. Through her mastery of abstract stream of consciousness malapropisms, she weaves a web of comic, satiric, cosmic conversation. Her subjects can range from Norman, the goose next door, to astrology and earth changes, and into the deep recesses of the soul matrix. She holds a wealth of knowledge on herbs, plants, and astrology. Join Mona and her guests on adventures of a feral hippie as she touches the earthly radio waves 5 days a week at 2 p.m. Monday to Friday on Studio B at Revolution Radio.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday, 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host. Listening to Revolution Radio.
You going back in?
There's still men out there. God damn. When I go home, people ask me, "Hey, Hoot, why do you do it, man? Why? You some kind of war junkie?" I won't say a goddamn word. Why? They won't understand. They won't understand why we do it. They won't understand it's about the men next to you. And that's it. That's all it is.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, #1 listener-supported radio, the printing press for freedom at a time when freedom is needed the most.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never...
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.